The stars burned like ancient fires, scattered across the endless dark, each a beacon of possibility and ruin. Humanity had come far since it first set its trembling feet upon alien soil, but its expansion was not the triumphant surge of myths. It was ragged, improvised, more desperate than glorious. Colonies sprouted in inhospitable systems like weeds in fractured stone, surviving more by stubbornness than by fortune. The frontier was vast, but every light in the void was surrounded by shadow. Kalen Morwen stood on the battered observation deck of the vessel Resolve of Dawn, staring at the streaking distortions of faster-than-light passage. He was not a captain by lineage or wealth, but by the kind of persistence that wore down opponents until there was nothing left to resist. His hair, already dusted with grey despite his relative youth, hung in uneven strands over eyes that rarely betrayed fatigue, though his body bore it deeply. He carried himself like a man who had never quite known rest, yet who had never ceased to rise again. The ship's interior bore no polish. Plates were mismatched, corridors patched with materials salvaged from forgotten wrecks, and the hum of the drive was not a confident pulse, but the uneven beat of a heart stitched together after too many wounds. The Resolve of Dawn was a survivor as much as the people aboard it. Kalen's second, a woman named Sarah Vale, stepped quietly onto the deck beside him. Her movements were precise, controlled, betraying years of martial training. She had once served in the armed fleet of the Terran Confluence before it fractured under the weight of political strife and external threats. Her uniform was long since discarded, replaced by utilitarian gear, yet she still carried herself like a soldier bound to duty. "We will exit jump space within the hour," she said, her voice low, steady. "Scouts confirm the system is still unclaimed. No signs of other settlements, no patrol signatures." Kalen nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the shifting veil outside. "Then perhaps we will have one more world to hold against the tide." Sarah studied him. "You do not sound convinced." "I have lived too long on promises of peace," Kalen replied. "Every system we find untouched feels like the eye of a storm, not sanctuary." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of Joran Kalex, the chief engineer. His frame was broad, shoulders stooped from years of labor in ship guts where gravity was fickle and light scarce. Grease streaked his cheeks, and his hands looked more like tools than flesh. "The drive is running hotter than I like," Joran grumbled, running a cloth across his palms. "Another cycle like this and she may not hold." Kalen gave him a weary smile. "You always say that, and I am always right," Joran retorted, though there was no real bitterness in his tone. "You ask the impossible of this vessel. She was not built for endless flight across contested space. One day she will give out, and I will not have the miracle you expect from me." "You have always found one before," Sarah said, though her voice carried no jest. Joran only shook his head. "Miracles have a cost, and sooner or later that debt is collected." The words lingered in the air, heavy as the unseen stars pressing in on them. The ship shuddered as the veil of jump space peeled away, replaced by the cold brilliance of an uncharted system. Before them stretched a pale sun, orbited by 6 worlds, 3 barren rocks, 1 storm-racked gas giant, and 2 temperate spheres whose surfaces gleamed with oceans and continents. Sensors flared to life, painting the void with information. Kalen felt the breath catch in his throat. The outermost of the temperate worlds showed signs of atmosphere rich enough for human survival, though harsh. Pockets of storm systems rippled across its surface, but within them lay valleys of green and rivers that carved silver scars through the land. "A world fit to take root," Sarah murmured. "Perhaps," Kalen replied, "if it does not already have roots of its own." For humanity had learned, with blood and fire, that the galaxy was not empty. There were other minds among the stars, minds older, stranger, and often hostile. Some dismissed humans as insects to be crushed, others regarded them as curiosities to be studied, and a few treated them as rivals to be resisted. Rare were the voices of kinship. The communications officer, a lean youth named Alaric, turned sharply in his seat. No active signals, no orbital structures detected. The planet is quiet. Either it is untouched, or he hesitated. Or abandoned, Sarah finished. Kalen gave the order to move closer. Engines rumbled, thrusters flared, and the vessel cut its path across the void. As they neared the planet, the surface grew sharper, more detailed, until valleys, mountains, and oceans sprawled beneath them like an ancient painting. Yet as the ship lowered its orbit, Joran swore under his breath. "I do not like this," he muttered. "Worlds like this are never simply waiting. There is always a reason." He was proven correct sooner than any had hoped. The sensor alarms blared without warning. Alaric's hands danced across controls, his eyes wide. Contact, multiple contacts rising from the planet's far side, ships, unknown configuration, not human design. Kalen felt the old familiar weight press against him, the inevitability of conflict. Numbers, 6 vessels, light tonnage, fast, armed. Sarah drew in a sharp breath. Scouts or raiders? "Or guardians," Kalen said grimly. "Bring us about, defensive posture." The alien ships broke through the planet's curve, sleek forms glinting like obsidian shards against the starlight. Their hulls bore no windows, no visible markings, only smooth dark metal that seemed to absorb the void. Energy signatures flared from them, weapons coming alive. A voice, strange and resonant, flooded the comms without translation delay, as though it already knew their tongue. "This world is not yours. Leave or be unmade." The words struck like thunder in the chamber. The crew froze, silence stretching. Then Sarah leaned forward, jaw tight. "They speak our language. Or something speaks it for them," Kalen murmured. His gaze hardened. "Open channel." Alaric complied, and Kalen's voice rang out. "We are not here as conquerors. We seek only to find a place where our people may endure. We claim no dominion beyond what we build with our own hands." For a heartbeat, there was no reply. Then the alien voice returned, colder, final. "Endurance is not permitted. Leave or die." The alien ships surged forward. The resolve of Dawn trembled as weapons charged. Kalen barked orders, and the crew sprang into motion. Cannons that had been patched and repatched roared to life, spitting fire into the void. Shields flared as enemy strikes slammed against them, sending ripples of energy across the hull. The battle was chaos given form. The alien craft were fast, darting like predators, their weapons cutting swathes of light through space. The human vessel was slower, heavier, but every strike it landed carried brutal weight. Joran cursed as sparks erupted from a console. Shields down to 40%, engines bleeding power. "Target their formation," Kalen ordered. "Make them break." Sarah's hands danced across the tactical display, and the ship's cannons fired in coordinated bursts. One alien vessel was caught off guard, its sleek frame torn apart in a burst of molten shards. The others circled tighter, pressing harder. The resolve of Dawn groaned under the assault, but Kalen refused to yield. Every life aboard, every colony depending on them, demanded resistance. At last, after what felt like an eternity, the alien ships pulled back, retreating toward the planet. One lingered, its hull scorched, before following the others into the shadows of the atmosphere. Silence fell once more, broken only by the labored breaths of the crew and the hiss of damaged systems. Kalen stood, fists clenched. "They will return. They know now what we carry, what we seek." Sarah turned to him, eyes burning. "Then we must decide. Do we abandon this world and seek another, or do we stand here against whatever comes?" Kalen looked down at the scarred planet below, its rivers glinting like veins of silver. He thought of humanity, scattered and bleeding, searching endlessly for a place to call its own. "We stand," he said at last, his voice iron. "We have fled enough. If the galaxy would deny us the right to endure, then we will carve that right from its very heart." The crew exchanged glances, some fearful, some resolute. Sarah nodded once, sharp and firm. "Then we prepare." Joran exhaled heavily, muttering, "So be it." And in the silence that followed, the frontier held its breath, waiting for the fire that was yet to come. The resolve of Dawn drifted in high orbit above the contested world, her hull scarred and trembling with each adjustment of thrusters. Fires had been extinguished, plating sealed with crude welds, and systems patched with whatever Joran and his engineers could scavenge. Yet the vessel carried herself with the same stubborn dignity as the crew within her, damaged, but not defeated. Kalen sat in the command chamber, staring at the holographic projection of the planet below. Clouds swirled across the surface, concealing oceans and continents, but he could not shake the feeling that eyes stared back from beneath those veils. The alien vessels had withdrawn for now, but there was no assurance they would not return in greater numbers. Sarah stood at his side, silent but tense. She had scarcely left the bridge since the battle, her mind already calculating defensive patterns, fallback routes, and strike options. She had the demeanor of someone who believed preparation could bend fate, though she had seen too many wars to truly believe it. Alaric broke the silence, his voice subdued. No further contacts since their retreat. Long-range scans show residual heat trails where they entered atmosphere, but we cannot track them further. They are there, watching. Kalen leaned forward, resting his elbows on the edge of the console. They could have destroyed us if they pressed harder. Why withdraw? Perhaps they underestimated our resilience, Sarah offered. Or they wished only to test us, Kalen countered, to see if humanity still remembers how to bleed. At that, Joran entered the chamber, his boots leaving faint smears of carbon across the deck. His face was shadowed with exhaustion, but his voice carried the usual blunt certainty. We cannot endure another engagement like that. Shields will not hold. Hull will not hold. If they bring more, we are finished. Kalen studied him. Would you have us abandon this world? I would have us live, Joran said simply. Kalen's gaze did not waver. Living is not the same as surviving. How many times have we fled, seeking another world? And how many have we lost again, driven out by those who deem us unworthy of existence? If we retreat once more, we become exactly what they think we are, wanderers without will, parasites too weak to claim soil of our own. Joran's jaw tightened, but he did not argue further. The debate was broken by a sudden shift in the holographic projection. A new signal flared to life, an anomaly rising from the far side of the planet, not a ship but something smaller, slower, controlled. A transmission, Alaric whispered. His hands moved swiftly, filtering the signal. It is not directed at our systems. It is wideband, primitive, unshielded. Kalen frowned. Open it. The bridge filled with a voice, unlike the harsh proclamation of the alien warships. This one was softer, layered with harmonics that resonated strangely in the ear, like multiple tones woven into one. And yet it too spoke in their language, though broken, uncertain. Those who stand against the silence listen. We are not of them. We are hunted as you are hunted. Meet and we will show you the truth. The voice faltered, distorted by static, before cutting off entirely. A hush fell over the crew. Then Sarah spoke, her words edged with suspicion. It is bait. They lure us down where they can finish what they began. Perhaps, Kalen said, but perhaps not. The enemy gave no name, no mark, only command. This voice spoke of choice. That is a difference worth noting. Alaric glanced up nervously. The signal came from the northern continent, mountainous region, minimal settlements, at least, none visible from orbit. If they are there, they are hiding. Hiding from whom? Joran muttered darkly. Kalen rose to his feet. Prepare a landing craft. I will meet them. Sarah stepped forward at once. Not alone. If it is a trap, we need strength. You will come with me, Kalen said, his voice leaving no room for dispute. But the ship must remain here, ready to defend itself should the others return. If we are to build any future on this world, we must understand who calls it home. Within the hour, a shuttle descended through the thickening atmosphere. Its hull rattled against high winds, and clouds lashed at its flanks with icy sheets. Kalen gripped the restraints, eyes fixed on the world below as jagged peaks tore through the haze, snow-capped and forbidding. Valleys spread wide between them, cradling rivers that wound like silver veins. It was a harsh beauty, raw and unclaimed. The craft landed in a clearing at the base of a ridge, its landing struts sinking into frost-hardened soil. The air outside registered thin but breathable. When the hatch opened, Kalen stepped out first, drawing the cold into his lungs like a challenge. Figures emerged from the rocks ahead. They moved with deliberate care, revealing themselves slowly as though aware of the danger. There were 5 of them, tall and lithe, their skin a pale hue that shimmered faintly as though reflecting unseen light. Their eyes were wide, dark, and unblinking, and their movements carried the fluid grace of predators and dancers alike. They wore no armor, only layered fabrics woven from fibers that caught the wind, and carried no visible weapons. Yet their presence was anything but fragile. One stepped forward, lowering the hood of its garment. Its face was sharp, almost too symmetrical, as if carved from stone and given life. When it spoke, the harmonics of its voice returned, broken yet comprehensible. "You fight the silence, you blade but you do not break. That is why we call to you." Kalen met its gaze steadily. "Who are you?" "We are the Forsaken Accord," the being said. "Once we were bound to those who now hunt you. Once we served their will, believing silence was truth. But we saw what silence brings: emptiness, erasure, the end of all voices. We would not endure it, so we broke away. And now we are hunted as you are hunted." Sarah's hand lingered near the hilt of her blade, though she did not draw it. "Why seek us? What makes humanity different from the countless others who have faced your so-called silence?" The being tilted its head. "Because you are loud." Kalen frowned. "Loud? In the tapestry of the stars, your kind does not whisper. You shout, you burn, you tear the void with your will to exist. The silence fears that they would erase you before your voice can rise." Kalen studied the being, weighing truth against deception. "If you have broken from them, why not fight openly? Why hide?" A shadow passed across the alien's expression. "Because the silence is vast. They are not one species, but many bound to their creed. They consume, assimilate, extinguish. To fight them openly is to be crushed beneath a tide that does not end. We survive only by striking in secret, by finding others who will not bend. And now we find you." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "And what would you have of us?" The being's gaze sharpened. "An accord. Stand with us, and we will teach you how to resist the silence, how to strike where they are weakest. Refuse, and you will face them alone. And alone, you will perish." The cold wind swept across the clearing, carrying silence between them. Kalen felt the weight of decision pressing upon him. He thought of the countless colonies lost, of worlds abandoned, of children born beneath skies that were never truly theirs. He thought of the promise he had made, to stand, no matter the cost. At last he said, "Show us proof. If you would ask humanity to fight beside you, then show us why your cause is not just another mask for conquest." The being inclined its head, as though expecting the demand. "Then come with us, see what silence leaves behind." It turned, leading them toward the mountains. For hours they traveled through winding paths, the alien guides moving with ease where the humans stumbled and strained. At last they reached a cavern mouth carved into the mountainside. Strange symbols adorned the stone, worn by age but still resonant with meaning. The beings entered without hesitation, torches flaring to life with crystalline light. Within lay vast chambers carved by both nature and hand, and within those chambers lay ruins. Not human, not alien in any familiar sense, but ruins nonetheless, structures melted, crumbled, broken as though by forces beyond weaponry. Bones littered the floor, elongated and twisted, remnants of a species that no longer drew breath. The leading being turned, its voice echoing softly. This was once a people. They sang with voices that shaped stone and air. They believed their harmony could endure the silence, but the silence does not break by harmony. It consumes, it unmakes. Now they are gone as though they never were. Kalen walked among the bones, his chest heavy with the weight of unseen centuries. He knelt, touching the brittle fragments of a skull, feeling the fragility of life beneath his fingers. Sarah's hand brushed the wall, tracing the melted stone. What could do this? The being's eyes darkened. The silence does not simply kill, it unravels. Energy that erases matter, thought, memory. Only echoes remain. These ruins are a wound, and wounds fade until only scar is left. Soon even this will vanish. Kalen rose slowly, his decision hardening. "If what you say is true, then humanity has no choice. We cannot flee forever. If we are hunted, then we must hunt in return. The being inclined its head in solemn recognition. Then the accord is made. Together we will strike against the silence. Together we will remind the void that not all voices can be erased. In that cavern of bones and echoes, among the remnants of a people erased, a pact was forged. Fragile, uncertain, but burning with the defiance that had carried humanity across the stars. And far above, unseen in the depths of space, the silence stirred. The cavern walls glowed with crystalline fire as Kalen and his companions retraced their steps, guided once more by the pale beings who called themselves the Forsaken Accord. Outside, the mountain winds still howled, but the world no longer seemed untouched. It felt wounded, scarred by histories that whispered in bone and ash. When they reached the clearing where their shuttle waited, the alien leader turned back to Kalen, its dark eyes unblinking. The choice has been spoken. You will stand against the silence. That path is not easily abandoned. Once you carry it until your end. Kalen nodded slowly. Humanity has always carried burdens until they broke us or we made them part of us. Show us what must be done. The being extended a hand, long and slender. In its palm rested a crystalline shard, faintly pulsing with inner light. This holds patterns, coordinates, knowledge. It will guide you to one of the silence's listening beacons, an outpost in the outer dark, where they gather echoes of all who resist. Strike it and you will draw their gaze, but you will also strike their pride. They believe themselves beyond reach. Show them they are not. Kalen accepted the shard. Its surface was cold, yet beneath it thrummed an energy unlike any technology he had known. He wondered if it would burn him alive or illuminate paths he could never walk alone. Sarah watched with sharp suspicion. Why do you not strike it yourself? The being lowered its hand. Because they know us, they hunt us as traitors, they would expect our hand, but you are different. You are loud, and they have not yet learned how loud you may be. Kalen studied the alien's solemn face. And if we succeed, then you will know the silence can bleed, and once a hunter bleeds, it can be slain. The accord melted back into the mountain shadows, leaving the humans alone. When Kalen and his crew returned to the resolve of dawn, the atmosphere was tense. Every face carried the unspoken question: had their captain made a pact with salvation or damnation? Alaric stood rigid at his post, eyes wary. Captain, do you trust them? Kalen did not answer at once. He looked out across the stars, where countless threats lay unseen. Trust is too heavy a word, but they have shown us what the silence leaves behind. That truth is enough. We will act on it. Joran scowled, arms folded across his chest. Act, yes, but I will not let my ship be led into suicide by shadows and riddles. We do not know what lies waiting at these coordinates. That is why we will find out, Kalen said. Prepare the drive. We leave orbit within the hour. The battered vessel shuddered as engines reignited, dragging it once more from the planet's embrace into the black. Within the command chamber, Kalen placed the crystalline shard into the sensor core. Immediately, streams of data spilled into the ship systems, alien coordinates woven into human maps. Alaric's eyes widened. It is accurate. Distances align. The beacon lies on the edge of a dying system, far from known trade routes. No natural reason to go there. Which is exactly why they built it there, Sarah said. The jump was long, stretching the vessel's failing systems to their limit. Kalen stood at the viewport as the streaks of light tore past, his mind heavy with doubt and determination. Humanity had wandered so far, yet still it stumbled into the jaws of predators. Perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps this time they would not stumble, they would strike. When the ship emerged from jump space, the system revealed itself in sullen silence. The star at its heart was a dying ember, its light weak and blood-red. Only 2 planets remained, both barren husks stripped long ago by forces unknown. Debris drifted through orbit like the bones of forgotten worlds. Alaric's voice trembled. There, the beacon. Suspended in the shadow of the outer planet was a structure unlike anything human eyes had seen. It resembled a spire of black stone, jagged and twisted, extending miles into the void. Energy rippled faintly along its length, pulsing like veins carrying lifeblood. It seemed less built than grown, a thing birthed from the void itself. Joran muttered a curse. "That is no beacon, that is a wound." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she studied the readouts. Energy emissions match no known spectrum. But signals, yes, it is transmitting. Wideband scattered, they are listening just as the Accord claimed. Kalen's hand tightened into a fist. Then we silenced their silence. The ship moved into position, weapons charging, but before Kalen could give the order to fire, alarms flared. "Contacts," Alaric shouted. Multiple, emerging from the beacon itself, like they were part of it. Shapes tore free from the spire, black shards unfolding into ships. Their hulls mirrored the structure's obsidian texture, and their movement was unnatural, like fragments of shadow gliding without resistance. Sarah cursed, "Defenders." Kalen's voice cut through the rising panic. "Form firing arcs. Do not let them swarm us. Strike with precision." The battle ignited. Human cannons thundered, casting fire into the void. Alien vessels darted with impossible grace, weaving between bolts of energy. The resolve of Dawn shuddered as enemy strikes tore into her patched hull. Sparks cascaded across consoles, smoke filling the air. Joran roared from engineering over comms. "Hull integrity failing. If we take another barrage like that, we will bleed out in minutes." Kalen's mind raced. They could not hold, not like this, not against such numbers, and yet the beacon loomed, pulsing with its hateful rhythm, a reminder of why they had come. "Sarah," Kalen shouted, "prepare the lance." Her eyes widened. "The lance will tear us apart as well. Better to tear ourselves apart striking than to fade in silence." Sarah hesitated, then nodded sharply. Her hands flew across the console, diverting every scrap of power into the experimental weapon that had lain dormant in the vessel's armory. It was a crude creation, forged from salvaged cores and unstable drives, more gamble than weapon. The ship's prow split open, light gathering at its heart. The alien defenders surged forward, sensing the threat. Kalen's voice rang out, iron and fire. Now, the lance fired. A torrent of searing energy lanced through the void, a beam so bright it carved shadows across the dying system. It struck the beacon dead center, and for a heartbeat all was still. Then the beacon screamed. It was not sound, but vibration through the void, a psychic resonance that tore through bone and mind alike. The crew staggered, clutching their heads as visions flooded their thoughts, worlds burning, voices snuffed out, civilizations erased in silence. And then the beacon shattered. The spire collapsed in on itself, imploding into a cascade of fragments that dissolved into nothingness. The defending vessels convulsed, their forms destabilizing before vanishing like smoke in wind. The void fell silent, truly silent. Kalen staggered to his feet, chest heaving. "Report." Alaric's voice shook. "Beacon destroyed, no further contacts, we did it." But Joran's voice came like a hammer. "We did it, yes, but at cost. The lance drained half our systems, engines crippled, shields down. If anything comes now, we cannot run, we cannot fight." Kalen sank into his chair, staring at the void where the beacon had been. He thought of the visions, the screams that had clawed at his mind. The silence was no mere enemy of ships and soldiers. It was an abyss that consumed memory itself. Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. "The Accord was right. They can bleed. But I fear they will not take this strike lightly." Kalen nodded. "Then let them come. For the first time, humanity has struck the abyss. We have shown we will not be erased. If the silence hunts us, then we will answer as only humanity can, with fire and defiance." The dying star cast its dim glow across the scarred vessel, a lone ember burning in shadow. And in the far reaches of the galaxy, the silence stirred, its gaze turning toward the voice that had dared to shout against it. The war had truly begun. The resolve of Dawn limped through the void, her hull scorched and groaning, her engines coughing sparks with every adjustment of thrust. For 3 days, the crew worked without pause to restore the vessel to something resembling life. Joran and his engineers crawled through ruptured ducts and half-melted conduits, cursing in equal measure at the ship's fragility and its stubborn refusal to die. Kalen moved among them when he could, offering his presence where he had no skill to lend. He knew words could not patch steel, but a leader's shadow could steady hands that trembled from exhaustion. Yet even as repairs progressed, the weight pressing on them all did not fade. It deepened. The visions had not left. Each crew member carried fragments of the beacon's final scream, images of worlds erased, voices extinguished, cities melting into nothing. Some spoke of dreams where silence itself stalked them, where their own names dissolved from memory. Kalen himself woke each night with the echo of those screams still clawing at his mind. And each night he reminded himself that the abyss could bleed. That was enough to rise again. On the fourth day, a signal cut through the static of the void. It was the Accord. Their leader's harmonic voice filled the bridge, softer than memory yet heavy with meaning. You struck the wound. The silence felt it. Already they gather. They will seek the hand that dared to strike them. Kalen answered at once. Then we must move. Where can we find sanctuary? There is no sanctuary, the Accord replied. Only shadows deep enough to delay their gaze, but there are places where their reach has already burned itself to ash, worlds they have consumed and abandoned. In the ashes, they do not look again. There you may hide, and there you will see more of what awaits if you falter. Coordinates followed, flowing across the bridge in streams of alien script translated into human stars. Sarah frowned, her arms crossed. Hide among ruins, that is no comfort. It is not meant as comfort, Kalen said. It is meant as truth. They set their course. The journey carried them into regions of the galaxy where few dared to travel, through corridors of dark space long abandoned by explorers and merchants alike. Systems passed where stars were gutted remnants, stripped of planets and life. They crossed fields of debris where once fleets had fought, their wrecks reduced to drifting monuments of silence. At last they reached their destination, a system whose star was a dim, sullen coal barely clinging to existence. 4 planets orbited its fading light, but only one bore scars deep enough to tell its story. When the ship entered orbit, silence fell across the crew. The world below was black, not night black, not the darkness of unlit stone, but the black of erasure. Continents stretched like ink stains across grey oceans, their surfaces melted smooth. No mountains rose, no rivers flowed. It was a canvas scraped clean. Alaric's voice trembled. There is nothing, no structures, no vegetation, no remnants of atmosphere beyond the bare minimum to hold pressure. It is dead. Sarah stared at the projection, her jaw tight. This is what they leave behind. Joran muttered under his breath. This is what they call victory. Kalen closed his eyes, gripping the edge of the console until his knuckles whitened. Then let us walk among it. We must know what waits for us if we fail. A shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere, landing on a plane of obsidian glass. The ground crunched beneath their boots like brittle bone. The air smelled of nothing, tasted of nothing. Even sound seemed muted, as though the planet itself refused to echo. They walked for hours across the featureless plain until at last they found something different, a pit. It was vast, a crater miles across, its edges smooth as though carved by a hand too large to fathom. At its center rose jagged shards of stone fused together, the only irregularity in an otherwise perfect void. Sarah crouched near the shards, her gloved hand brushing across their surface. This is not natural. Something stood here once, something vast. Joran frowned, running instruments over the stone, trace energy readings, old but potent. Whatever was here was unmade, yet fragments resisted. A structure, perhaps, or a city. Kalen gazed across the pit, trying to imagine what had been. Towers, perhaps, or monuments, erased so completely that even their shadow had been devoured. This was a people, he said quietly. This was their home, and now it is ash. The Accord's representative had joined them, its pale form standing motionless at the crater's edge. Its voice carried softly. The silence does not conquer, they do not enslave, they do not build, they erase. To them, only silence is perfection. Any voice, any memory is threat. Kalen turned sharply. Then why do they allow you to exist at all? If they are so thorough, why leave traitors alive? The being's dark eyes shimmered faintly. Because silence believes it inevitable. They do not fear our defiance, for they believe all defiance ends the same. That arrogance is their weakness. That arrogance is what you struck when you shattered their beacon. Sarah rose, her gaze hard, and now they will come to correct their mistake. Yes, the Accord said simply. The crew returned to the ship in silence, each bearing the weight of what they had seen. Yet as the resolve of dawn broke orbit, a new signal pierced their systems. Alaric's eyes widened. Incoming transmission, wideband directed at us specifically, not the Accord. Kalen frowned. Origin, unknown. It is strange, fragmented, but it carries human code. The bridge froze. Human, Sarah repeated. Out here, Alaric nodded. It matches Confluence encryption, but altered, corrupted. Kalen's chest tightened. Put it through. The voice that filled the chamber was warped, distorted by static and something more unnatural. Yet beneath the corruption, it was undeniably human. This is the seventh outpost. We live, we fight, we are not erased. Then silence. Alaric looked up pale. The signal repeats, that is all. Joran's brow furrowed. The confluence collapsed decades ago. No outpost should remain this far. If one survived, Kalen's heart pounded. Humanity was scattered, broken, fragmented across the stars. Many colonies had been lost, swallowed by war or by the silence itself. But if survivors remained, if an outpost endured, it changed everything. Sarah's voice was cautious. It could be a trap. The silence could be using echoes of human voices to lure us. Kalen's eyes burned with fire. Or it could be proof that we are not as alone as we believed. Plot a course. The coordinates lay further beyond, in a region of space where maps grew unreliable and stars grew thin. As they traveled, the crew wrestled with hope and dread alike. When at last they arrived, they found not silence, but fire. The seventh outpost orbited a barren moon, its structure jagged and scarred, built from pieces of ships welded together in desperate survival. Its defenses were active, cannons swiveling as the resolve of dawn approached. Signals flared across the void, demanding identification. Kalen's voice rang out across comms. We are human. We come seeking kin. There was a pause, and then a reply. This time the voice was clearer, hoarse, worn, but undeniably human. Then by the stars, you are the first we have seen in 30 years. Doc, and may the void forgive us all. The outpost accepted them, and for the first time in decades, scattered children of Earth looked upon one another across the gulf of survival. Yet even as hands clasped and voices rose in disbelief, shadows lingered. For if humanity had endured here, then so too had the silence, and their gaze was drawing ever closer. The air inside the seventh outpost was thin and metallic, tasting of recycled systems that had not been renewed in decades. Corridors twisted like intestines through welded hulls, patched with plating scavenged from wrecks long since forgotten. Light panels flickered with erratic rhythm, more shadow than illumination, and the hum of failing reactors reverberated like the heartbeat of some dying beast. Yet amid that ruin walked humanity, gaunt figures with hollow cheeks and eyes bright with wary defiance. Children too thin, born into steel corridors without ever seeing a sky. Old men and women with bent backs who had survived longer than reason allowed. Kalen moved through the station with Sarah at his side, every step followed by stares. Some eyes glittered with suspicion, others with desperate hope. At last they reached the central chamber, a cavernous hold converted into a gathering place. Hundreds of survivors stood there, their breath steaming in the chill air, their murmurs rising like a tide. Upon a platform stood a figure wrapped in a tattered uniform, its insignia long faded. His hair was white, his face a map of scars, yet his posture remained that of command. When he raised a hand, the voices fell to silence. "I am Commander Thalen Arik," he said, his voice gravel ground against years of silence. "Once of the Terran confluence, now of the seventh outpost, And you are the first new blood we have seen in 30 years. Kalen stepped forward, bowing his head slightly in respect. Kalen Morwen, captain of the vessel Resolve of Dawn, we have wandered long, fled far, seeking a place to endure. And now we find you. Thalen studied him with piercing eyes. Endure? Few remember that word out here. We do not endure. We scrape, we bleed, we cling. What you see here is not life. It is survival carved from the bones of despair. Kalen met his gaze unflinching. Survival is the seed. Life is what grows when survival finds root. If you have clung this long, then you are proof humanity cannot be erased. That proof may yet become fire. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some smiled faintly, others frowned with doubt. Sarah's voice cut through the tension, sharp and sure. You are not alone. The galaxy would have us believe humanity is scattered dust, but we remain. We have fought the silence. We have wounded it. The words struck like a spark against dry tinder. Whispers surged, disbelief colliding with desperate hope. Thalen's eyes narrowed. You speak of the silence as though it were prey, yet you stand before me in a ship more scar than hull, with a crew half-starved and weary. How could you strike them? Kalen drew the crystalline shard from his coat, holding it aloft. The light within it pulsed faintly, casting shadows across the chamber. We struck one of their listening beacons. We shattered it. The silence can bleed. Gasps spread like wildfire. Men and women who had lived decades believing the silence untouchable now stared as though a veil had been torn from their eyes. Thalen descended from the platform, his boots echoing against the steel. He stopped before Kalen, searching his face as though seeking falsehood. At last, he spoke in a low voice meant for Kalen alone. If what you say is true, then the fire we once carried may yet be kindled. But fire burns not only the enemy, it burns the hand that wields it. Do you understand what you have awoken? Kalen's answer was iron. I do, and I will not let it fade. That night the outpost came alive with voices. Families who had given up on dreams spoke of Earth as if it were more than myth. Children asked questions about skies and rivers. Engineers long resigned to patching leaks began sketching designs, remembering what it felt like to build. Yet amid the rising flame of hope, shadows stirred. Sarah moved quietly through the corridors, her soldier's instincts prickling. She did not trust easily, and though she had seen the spark in these survivors, she also saw their desperation. Desperation made men reckless. Desperation made men dangerous. She found Kalen alone in a docking bay, staring at the battered form of the Resolve of Dawn. You have lit a fire here, she said, her voice quiet. Kalen did not look at her. Was that not our purpose? Purpose is not the same as control, she replied. Fire spreads. These people have endured too long in shadow. Now they will want war. They will demand more than we can give. Kalen turned then, his eyes weary but resolute. War is coming whether they demand it or not. The silence will not ignore what we have done. We need every voice, every hand, every ember. If they wish to fight, let them fight. Sarah's jaw tightened, and if they break against the silence as glass shatters against stone, then they break loudly, Kalen said, and their echoes will buy us time. Before she could answer, alarms blared across the outpost. Red light bathed the corridors, sirens howled, and panicked voices rose. Kalen and Sarah ran for the command chamber, where Thalen already stood at the console barking orders. Contacts, shouted a young operator. Multiple vessels approaching fast, not human configuration. The word spread before anyone spoke it. Silence. Kalen's chest tightened. They had been found. Thalen's voice was steady despite the panic. Raise defenses. Power every cannon, every shield. Sarah leaned toward Kalen, whispering fiercely, This is no accident. Someone here has called them. They knew where to find us. Kalen's thoughts raced, but there was no time. The screens lit up with the sight of obsidian vessels sliding from the void, sleek and silent as knives. They surrounded the outpost in perfect formation, weapons glowing faintly, and then a voice filled the chamber. It was not human, not a cord, not anything of flesh. It was emptiness given form, cold and endless. You shout where silence must reign, you strike where silence must endure, now you will be unmade. The outpost trembled as the first barrage struck, shields flaring, hulls groaning. Human cannons answered, spitting fire into the void, but the disparity was vast. The silence moved with precision, their weapons tearing through steel as if it were paper. Kalen seized the comms, his voice thunderous. "This is Kalen Morwen of the Resolve of Dawn. We do not yield, we do not bend. If you would erase us, then come and blade." His words rallied the defenders. Cannons roared louder, fighters scrambled from rusted hangars, and engineers jury-rigged weapons from mining equipment. It was chaos, desperate and wild, but it was human. The Resolve of Dawn, half repaired, launched into the void once more, her engines screaming. Joran shouted over the comms, cursing the ship's fragility, but his hands moved with fury, coaxing life from dying systems. Sarah commanded batteries with ruthless precision, her voice a blade cutting through panic. The battle was slaughter. Dozens of fighters were torn apart in minutes. The outpost's hulls split in places, air venting into the void, but still they fought. And then, through the chaos, the Accord arrived. Their vessels emerged from shadow, sleek and pale, striking like blades of light. They tore into the silence formation with sudden ferocity, catching them unprepared. Alien weapons flared, not erasure but disruption, unraveling the coherence of silence hulls. Kalen's heart surged. The Accord had not abandoned them. Together, human and Accord forces struck back. The silence formation wavered, then broke, their vessels retreating into the void. Silence fell across the battlefield, broken only by the crackle of comms and the sobs of the living. The outpost was half destroyed, hundreds dead, but it had not been erased. It still stood. Humanity still stood. Thalen collapsed into a chair, blood seeping from a wound on his side. He looked up at Kalen, his voice hoarse but steady. "You were right. Fire does not fade, it spreads. If we are to fall, then let us fall as a forge, not as ash." Kalen gripped his hand. "Then let us forge together. Accord, outpost, wanderers. Humanity will not be silent, not now, not ever." And in the aftermath of ruin, a new alliance was born, not of choice, but of necessity. The forge of humanity had stirred, and its fire would not be easily quenched. The outpost was a wound stitched in haste. Hull plates had been torn away and welded back in crooked seams, scorched chambers were sealed behind bulkheads, and the dead were carried with solemn silence into the void. Yet amid the ruin, the survivors moved with a vigor unseen in decades. The battle had not crushed them, it had lit a fire. In the cavernous gathering hold, where once despair had pooled like stagnant water, now burned the heat of determination. Men and women sharpened makeshift blades, repaired rifles, stripped wreckage for salvageable parts. Children sang low songs in corners, voices thin but steady, carrying echoes of an earth most had never seen. Kalen walked among them, his presence drawing nods, some even smiles. He did not smile himself, the weight was too heavy, but within him stirred something deeper than hope. It was conviction. At the platform, Commander Thalen stood, his bandaged side a constant reminder of what had been lost, yet his voice carried with strength. "The silence will return," he declared. "What we faced was no more than a claw of the beast. They will come in force to erase what resisted them. We cannot outrun them and we cannot hide, but we can fight. And when they return, we will make them remember that humanity is not ash, we are fire." The crowd roared, a sound ragged yet powerful. Beside Thalen stood the Accord emissary, its pale form gleaming faintly under the lights. When it spoke, its voice was like glass humming. "The silence believes defiance is folly. They see you as sparks to be smothered, yet sparks gathered become flame, and flame becomes inferno. We have wandered too long in shadow. Now we stand with you, together we forge." For the first time, Kalen saw survivors of the Accord bow their heads to humanity, not in pity or command, but in respect. Preparations began. The seventh outpost was no fortress, but it became one in spirit. Engineers worked side by side with Accord artisans, merging alien disruption weapons with human cannons. Children carried scrap metal, their small hands darting with purpose. Old men told stories of ancient battles, their words igniting young hearts. The Resolve of Dawn received repairs that were more resurrection than mending. Joran cursed every moment, but smiled more than Kalen had ever seen him. Sarah drilled fighters and volunteers, her harsh voice driving them past exhaustion. Even Alaric, once quiet, found fire in his tone, weaving morale through careful words and steady leadership. Days passed, then weeks, and then the horizon darkened. The silence came, not a handful of vessels, but an armada. The void beyond the outpost blossomed with obsidian forms, sleek as knives, silent as death. They stretched across the stars, blotting light, their numbers uncountable. The voice came again, cold and vast, resonating in the marrow of every living being. You refuse silence, you shout in the void, you will be erased. Kalen stood in the command chamber, his hands gripping the console. His voice thundered in reply. Erase us if you can, but know this, humanity is not silence. Humanity is the fire that devours silence. Come and burn. The armada descended. The first barrage struck like a hammer. Shields flared, hulls screamed, and the outpost shuddered. Human cannons answered with fury, launching shells and beams into the void. Accord weapons followed, unraveling silence hulls into streams of broken shadow. Fighters streaked from hangars, small and fragile, yet burning with determination. The void became fire. Kalen's orders cut across comms like lightning, Sarah directing squadrons with ruthless efficiency. Joran coaxed every ounce of power from dying systems, pushing engines and shields beyond limits. Thalen's voice rallied defenders, commanding batteries with the steadiness of decades. For hours they held. Silence vessels burned, broken apart by relentless strikes. Yet for each that fell, two more emerged. The outpost bled, its defenses crumbling piece by piece. In the heart of battle, Kalen's mind sharpened with grim clarity. They could not win by endurance. They could only win by defiance, so fierce it could not be ignored. He turned to the Accord emissary. Is there a core, a heart to their fleet? The being's eyes shimmered. There is always a center. The silence commands from Nexus vessels, where thought converges into one will. Strike the Nexus and the rest falters. Kalen's jaw tightened. Then we strike. He rallied a strike force, fighters, scavenged gunships, Accord vessels willing to risk annihilation. At the center flew the resolve of Dawn, her scarred hull blazing with renewed fire. Through the tide of enemy vessels they plunged, weaving through beams and torrents of erasure. Fighters died around them, consumed in bursts of light, but the survivors pressed on. At last they saw it, the Nexus vessel. Vast, obsidian, a cathedral of silence drifting amid the storm. Its surface was flawless, its presence crushing, as though the void itself bent to its will. Kalen's voice rose over comms. There lies the heart. Every weapon, every breath, every shred of fury, strike it, the fleet answered. Beams and shells converged on the Nexus, but its shields flared, absorbing the storm. The vessel retaliated, tearing through human ships with effortless precision. The resolve of Dawn shook under the onslaught, alarms screaming, hull breaching in places. Joran shouted curses, Sarah bellowed orders, Alaric whispered steady words to terrified crews. Kalen's gaze burned on the Nexus. His mind raced, then clarity struck. The shard. He seized the crystalline fragment from his coat, holding it high. Its light pulsed wildly, resonating with the Nexus as though answering a call. The Accord emissary's voice trembled. It is part of their design, return it, and it will tear them from within. Kalen's voice thundered, then we return it in fire. He turned to Sarah, prepare a course straight into the heart. Her eyes widened. That is suicide. It is defiance, Kalen said. And if silence is perfection, then let them hear the imperfection of humanity's final cry. The crew did not argue, they understood. Each had already chosen long ago. The resolve of Dawn roared toward the Nexus, weaving through torrents of annihilation. Fighters cleared a path, sacrificing themselves to shield the vessel. Accord ships followed, their weapons burning bright even as they fell one by one. The Nexus loomed. Kalen clutched the shard, its light searing his hand. He felt its hunger, its pull toward the vessel. With a final breath, he hurled it into the core of the ship's weapon array. The shard blazed, fusing with human steel and alien systems alike. the resolve of dawn became more than a vessel. It became a beacon of defiance. The ship struck the nexus. For a moment, silence reigned, perfect, absolute silence. Then fire. The shard detonated, not in destruction but in defiance. Light erupted across the nexus, unraveling its perfection, tearing its coherence apart. Silence screamed, not with voices, but with the collapse of their will. Vessels faltered, their unity shattered, their formation dissolving into chaos. The outpost roared with renewed fury, striking down crippled ships. The Accord pressed the attack, their weapons cutting through faltering hulls, and in the void where silence had reigned, humanity's cry echoed. The Nexus vessels split apart, fragments burning across the stars. The resolve of dawn was gone, consumed in the blaze, but her sacrifice burned brighter than any star. When the battle ended, the silence was not destroyed. They remained, countless and endless, but they had been wounded, shattered, forced to retreat, and humanity still stood. In the aftermath, the survivors gathered once more in the hold of the seventh outpost. Faces streaked with ash and tears, eyes burning with grief and fire alike. Thalen stood, his voice heavy with loss yet unbroken. Kalen Morwen is gone, the resolve of dawn is gone, but they gave us what the silence cannot erase. They gave us defiance. They gave us fire. And as long as we breathe, as long as one ember of humanity remains, we will burn. The Accord emissary bowed its head. You have taught us that silence is not inevitable, that even in the void fire may rise. We are bound now not by necessity but by choice. Sarah, her eyes red but her voice steady, raised her weapon high. We will carry the fire, for Kalen, for the dawn, for every voice erased. Humanity does not fade, humanity does not fall, humanity burns. The chamber erupted in a roar that shook the steel walls, a cry carried across every corner of the outpost, and far beyond, across the stars, whispers stirred. Humanity lived, humanity fought, humanity burned. The forge of man was lit, and its fire would not be quenched.